Hi, I'm Lucia Lee. I'm an educator and creative writer.
And I'm JT Neal. I'm an organizer, writer, poli-sci nerd, and just a general geek. And you're listening to What's Wrong Baltimore,
Our podcast where we talk about Baltimore
the issues that affect the people who live in it.
and the implications they carry to all American cities.
Welcome. Hope you're ready to sit back and do some listening, because we're going to do some talking.
How are you doing, JT?
I'm doing okay. My mom fell. She's okay, but she has had over the last 5 years a surprising number of I fell and hit my head situations. So
Yeah.
everyone was just like, "Are you concussed? How are you doing? How are you feeling?" So she had a bruise and a little bump, but she's good. Yeah,
Yeah, my parents are having things like that. Balance is a thing that you have to work at, or it atrophies, I guess, as you age. And
yeah,
it feels like kind of like you grieve and you feel embarrassed about losing ability, but not acknowledging it is probably worse than, you know, feeling embarrassed.
very true.
And I hope she
Very, very
recovers.
true.
That's kind of scary. I'm glad she's mostly okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew the day would come when I, as a child, because I'm an only child, where I would take care of my parents the way they took care of me. I just thought it would be a little further down the line. I'll be
It's
honest.
gradual.
It is gradual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sneaks up on you. But this is a rough segue, but here we go. Captain America Civil War, the Marvel movie.
Yeah. Speaking of geriatrics,
For those of you who don't know, Captain America Civil War, I forget what year it came out, but it was kind of in the upward trajectory of the Marvel movie releases, I believe, and I feel like things have kind of slowed down in terms of hype potentially nowadays.
2016. It released
Yeah.
May 6th, 2016.
So a different time, pre-pandemic time, right? Yeah, and basically it talks about a division that occurs among the Avengers where Captain America believes that superheroes should be free to save the day and help people as they need to, whereas Iron Man has some doubts about that and thinks there should be some checks and balances to superhero work,
Yeah.
and some government oversight over the Avengers. So, yeah, JT, starting off of there, what insight or takes do you have on that?
Well, I'll say just because it is important to know, the title of the movie literally alludes to a moment within the Marvel Universe. We see there's a really great scene that deep cut Marvel fans love to highlight. There's a scene in the movie where the two sides, the two differing opinions, Iron Man's people and Captain America's people are at an airport fighting, and they're literally lined up. And the thing is that in the comic book there are thousands of. If this moment is analogous to a moment in a comic book, there are thousands of people on each side, right? The whole point was that there's a whole Marvel family, and everybody's doing hero work, right? And this is a moment, an inflection point where in that universe, in the Marvel universe, someone is like, hey, these superheroes keep blowing up New York City. I don't think if you have the power to move a car with your mind or punch a hole through a wall, that you just do that without impunity. There should be a structure, there should be rules. We can't just have Wolverine running around with claws cutting things up. What happens if he gets drunk and mad and messes up somebody's car? Who's going to pay for that, right? And so Iron Man is in that camp. There should be some kind of a structure. We should follow some kind of rule. There should be some accountability. And Captain America is like, what happens when politicians, for the sake of security, say, don't go to that country and save those people? There may be something morally wrong, but because of the law, you can't go, right? And that's also the argument in the movie. But it's something that I think highlights a question of morality versus legality. I've had this conversation a bunch of different times with a bunch of different people, but the law isn't moral. Morality is morality and law is law. Sometimes laws are immoral. Other times laws enforce morality, right? No one's going to argue that the law against murder isn't moral. But at the same time, slavery has been legal. At times, a woman being able to have her own bank account was like illegal. There are elements of the law that are not necessarily moral. And so, not to spoil the movie, but the opening is this moment in an African country where a bad guy basically tries to blow himself up to like kill someone, and Scarlet Witch like throws him out of the way so he doesn't kill anyone. However, she throws him into a building that then explodes. And there's shrapnel and people are, there's all kinds of damage. And that was sort of the inflection point, right? That was the moment where the world at large was like, okay, the Avengers have been flying around and this is the last straw. And so I think the highlighting of that distinction of like morality versus legality is something that we see routinely, but we don't often really get to like dig into it, right? This is why I love the concept of this movie and like comic books and stuff, because then we do get to sort of flesh out this idea a little bit more. So if I
Yeah,
may ask,
absolutely. And shout out to our episode about Lincoln suspense habeas corpus in Maryland, where we kind of touch on that very morality versus legality conversation a little, seeing the way society leaves people behind in just real life events that are extremely tragic, like natural disasters. I just think that is crazy that it took such mass tragedy for people to be like, hold on, maybe we should regulate superheroes because you can't get flood insurance in Florida.
hmm
So, all that to say, like, I would not particularly want a whole crew of superheroes in my city. um, but yeah, I did not get that context of like it's actually a war. It's not like a handful of Avengers against another
yeah,
handful of Avengers. So it was weird that they called it war for the movie, even though it's like hearkening to the comic
hmm
conflict.
yeah, it's it's sometimes it's hard to like point out like, hey y'all, like I think realistically what they were trying to do, the producers were trying to set this up so that it's like a long term, everybody's picking a side. Some superheroes are, always with Iron Man and they're always like following whatever the rules are because Captain America breaks people out of the super prison, right? Like at the end of the movie. Because there were some people who were preemptively arrested just by virtue of just sort of some of the things that they were doing or were capable of, right? And it's something that I think they were trying to sell long term continuously, but when you have 15 different movies that come after this on the schedule and they're about individual heroes, sometimes you can lose the plot beats from a movie that chronologically you were probably shooting at the same time, right? Like I'm not going to factor that plot point into my movie because I'm actively making my movie. They're not even done yet. So yeah.
Yeah, I want to comment on how poorly the title has aged.
See, it
Call it
came out
Civil War, like
before,
America Civil War. Like that's
it came out like while Donald Trump was running. Like I think it was interesting, like it came out at a time period where like people were starting to like openly consider the discussion of a second civil war or a lack of civility.
yeah,
um
absolutely. And you kind of talk about how in the comics there's like a linear like building of people already have close ties to Iron Man, or people already have some level of like leaning one way or the other for their loyalty, and that is completely lost. I don't understand how someone could beat up Tom Holland Spider-Man to the death over talking about government over like he's a kid. I don't know. It just felt like that context was completely missed on my part.
What I love is the very first X-Men movie, like when we were kids, ironically enough, does a better job of selling the idea. Because in that movie, like the anti-mutant senator literally says, like, we can legislate, you can have a teenage girl with more destructive power than a typical handgun. Shouldn't we legislate that? And like, that's the concept, right? Like, these are people, human beings. They also happen to have superpowers. And can they act, unilaterally? If you can shoot laser beams out of your eye and you see someone mugging someone, how much trouble do you get in if you like laser them real quick? You're just somebody walking by on the street, but you can cut their leg off with your eyes. There's got to be that's different than just tripping someone, right? Or like calling the police. And
Yeah.
it's a discussion that I think you're right. The movie didn't quite pull that idea and illustrate it.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk about the cliche of the divisiveness, the divided times, whatever. But like states are literally suing the federal government about them trying to knock down birthright citizenship.
It's funny. I thought it was interesting because, number one, if you get rid of birthright citizenship, how do you apportion citizenship? Like, I think Trump and some other people were like, oh, it's gonna, that was a terrible idea. And it's like, no, it makes it very easy to determine who a citizen is and isn't. And it's like, what are we supposed to go to? Because citizenship wasn't exactly fairly apportioned before the 14th Amendment,
Mm-hmm.
was it? The 14th Amendment actually does more things. Like, the citizenship component is at the very top, but the 14th Amendment is actually the amendment that gives us the legal precedent and the legal concept, the constitutional concept of due process, right? It is the provision of the Constitution that prohibits not only the federal government, but specifically the states cannot violate your rights as a citizen. That is what it says. And if you were to say, I don't know, denigrate the standing of the 14th Amendment to the point where the court just, for some reason, invalidates its actual protection, an individual state can say, anyone who's ever logged on to CNN, we're just going to go ahead and ban that. We're going to make it a felony if you've ever been to CNN. Well, there's a collection of people who get the news who just don't go to CNN, right? Why are you banning CNN? And more importantly, how are you going to arrest these people over here for just having gone and not those people over there? And so it's a very interesting situation to be in where, like, they're making the argument against birthright citizenship, but the more you isolate that amendment and remove it, the more danger every citizen is in. And because it's like, white supremacists really don't like the 14th Amendment, not because of the birthright citizenship, but because it means you can't mistreat a Japanese American because they have Japanese ancestry. It means you can't denigrate or make any rules or legislation against African Americans for being African American, right? The whole push against like DEI training and all these other things, these initiatives highlight the fact that, like, if someone has been systemically like harmed, you can't say they are equal to someone who hasn't had that harm, right? Like, the whole point, the whole disdain constitutionally about affirmative action never acknowledges the fact that the people who are being helped and being moved up or given extra consideration, well, they have a negative, they have a weight around their legs that you don't acknowledge when you're just like, everybody who gets these scores gets to come in. What if I've never been able to get the practice test because they don't do testing in my inner city school,
Hmm.
right? I live in Philadelphia, and nowhere in the city of Philadelphia is there a testing center for this particular test. So how is it fair? How can you say that everyone gets equal consideration when I never even had access? Which has been the thinking behind everyone who's advocate constitutionally, legally in the court system for things like DEI, things like affirmative action, stuff like that. That's what they've been saying. And it's kind of weird to be in a position where the average American doesn't hear that and doesn't recognize that argument because everyone is so busy being like, we're being so unfair to this person because we're giving somebody else a leg up. And it's like, no, no, no. We're not giving anybody a leg up, right? But the 14th Amendment is the amendment that protects us from these sorts of things. That truly, literally says things need to be equal. The government can't hurt someone over here and help someone over there. Like it has to be level. And it is not scary, but certainly a surprising twist of danger in this day and
Absolutely.
age.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't realize that kind of um, component of the 14th Amendment, um, where it asserts that, if you're a citizen, you're a citizen, and
Hmm.
you are, due the rights of a citizen. I think I was thinking about it more like logistically, how would that even work?
Right?
Because I'm thinking about
Right?
my sister, for example. Okay, she was born in the United States, born a citizen, but I don't think my parents were citizens when she was born, but they're citizens now.
Hmm.
So would that mean that's birthright citizenship because they weren't citizens, they were immigrants when they were born, even though they're citizens? Like, what does that mean? And then where would she go?
Hmm.
To Korea, to Argentina? Like, it doesn't even
Exactly.
logistically. How would you implement and enforce that kind of executive order? And that like makes my head hurt.
Yeah. I
And it
will say
doesn't
the executive
make
order.
sense. Like, how would they really even do that?
Yeah. Like I will say the executive order straight up fully is like a test. Like they want a suit, but again, what is the alternative? Is it something where I have citizenship because my parents had citizenship? Well, I am the descendant of the enslaved. There is a point where my grandparents of some at some number aren't citizens. So are
Hmm.
you saying that me, the child of a citizen, who's a child of a citizen, who's the child of a citizen, who's the child of someone who was not a citizen, no longer has citizenship? That invalidates a lot of people who have like
Yes.
different levels of immigration. It's something where I know there isn't an alternative
Yeah.
because the alternative that like some of the people behind the scenes want is a kind of pick and choose. And they don't want there to be any clarity on what the alternative is. They don't want it to make sense. Because then if it makes sense, you can say, hey, you just violated your own rule. Or hey, these people over here don't get to be a part of this. And it's something where birthright citizenship is a great idea for a nation state because then it means you don't get stratified citizenship structures where these people over here they get all the benefits and these people over here get all of the punishments. And
Mhm.
like, because that right there is what causes revolutions, right? The French Revolution was poor people. Truly, it's not just that they were poor and didn't have anything to eat. They were like, if you were rich, you could just kick someone on the street. You could just beat them to death, right? Like the Magna Carta was written because the king could just take your house and your wife and just because. And it was like, no, we're not doing that. So it's a weird I almost said weird flex. It's a weird idea to be like, we need to get rid of this thing that inherently stops any sort of stratification of who is and who isn't a citizen, right? Because, like, are we going to do first gen citizenship now? Is it like, okay, you only get these rights and you get access to these things if you're a citizen, but your parents aren't? If your grandparents were citizens. Also, how do I prove my grandparents were citizens? I just realized, how do I
I was
prove
thinking that.
how do you prove any of this?
How would you go about retroactively nullifying birthright citizenship as well? Like the first generation of your family that were citizens. You're saying they're not citizens because their parents were citizens. So then like what does that mean, you know?
Yeah, see, it's messed up. And normally I would say I'm not that concerned about it. But the Supreme Court
Steps on
over
precedent.
the past few years has like I've said it before. I don't know if I've said it on the podcast, but their decision that overturned Roe was poorly written, and it explicitly says that the decision we made X amount of years ago was wrong. The Supreme Court had never really done that before. They had only ever modified a previous decision in the sense that the only thing they could do is usually make it more narrow or add a layer on top. The Supreme Court's never done that because as soon as you do it once, you can keep doing it, which means you could pack the court and then say, you know how we made this decision that overturned Roe? No, we didn't. In fact, while we're here, why don't we go ahead and remove this other precedent, which then upends all of these other things, right? Like our legal system, like we have, sorry, I'm so nerding out about this.
It's
We have
okay.
a common law system, which is different, juxtaposed with like a statutory system. Like so, France, they have all of their laws are prescribed; they are written down. Common law is where you have entire swaths of law that wasn't written down. It's from precedent, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, most of the law around around property rights, those are things that were adjudicated in a court. They were never written down other than like a decision that was just recorded. And all of that, it layers and it layers and it layers and it modifies. And sometimes it falls down, right? A new law is actually written down or something happens and someone's like, hey, women can own property too, right? Like the sandcastle will fall. But the good thing about it is that it layers. It keeps adding and adding and adding. And over time, it solidifies and it gets to be what we need it to be. It's flexible in a particular way that like France doesn't have, right? If it's not written down, it's not a law, right? So if something new happens and it goes to court, well, it's not a law, so I guess the case is dismissed. Whereas
Dang.
in America, you have the flexibility to be like, okay, hang on. It's not written down, no one's talked about it, but these three similar situations pointed towards this, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that pointing applies to this new case as well. Bam,
Yeah,
now
I
we
guess
have
that's
new law.
why people are able to reference cases to
Hmm.
like make arguments about, yeah, what
Yeah,
should
and
be
when
law.
exactly, and when the Supreme Court removes elements of that, that kind of makes the whole ecosystem a lot more fragile, right?
Yeah,
Like
you're
if
the one
you,
who told me about how was it Plessy v. First separate but equal. Brown versus
hmm
Board didn't necessarily undo that completely, but said, yeah, but it's not equal, so we can't do it.
hmm if equality is the purpose, then like, yeah, I was literally about to bring that up.
Yeah, because I learned from you. Yeah, but even something that like seems to completely overturn, it's not necessarily just erase that. It's like let's add a nuance or a layer to it. And
hmm
things.
it offers clarity, right?
Yeah.
And that's one reason why I disliked that case because it opens an unfortunate door that we can't close. Like, I won't lie. If I became president, if that is something I would do, I would pack the courts and I would encourage through open means. I wouldn't even deny it. Like I would go on national television and be like, hey, if you live in one of these X states that have like anti-abortion laws of any kinds on the books, sue somebody. I
Mm.
need 15,000 court cases. And that would be my MO because there are certain protections that have come from other protections.
Mm-hmm.
If you do revise, like if you're like, we're going to get rid of Plessy v. Ferguson, right? It doesn't really apply. We haven't had segregation in a really long time. So, well, I say that. I say that. My mom was born during segregation. We haven't had segregation as a law of the land for 40 plus years. You remove that thing from the, 40s, you remove that particular court case. Well, there were court cases after that that referenced that had things that do other things, that aid in some other way. Well, now those cases can't really stand anymore, right? Even bad precedent is nonetheless precedent and can serve a purpose. But undoing precedent is not a good precedent. It's an inherently negative precedent. It is a void. It is a void that is entirely too dangerous. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, now we live in a world where the Supreme Court might come out and say, you know what? I don't think the 14th Amendment is constitutional. That doesn't make any sense,
Mm.
but neither does invalidating precedent, right?
Yeah, like that's the danger of, cases that even if the case is ruled to do something for good that is moral, if you open the door in that way to destroy precedents or whatever, then other people can go through that door. And
Hmm.
that is an issue. And yeah, I feel like people's faith in the judicial system eh, is pretty, I don't know how to, it's been soiled. I don't know. It's just like not
Yes,
great.
it has definitely been soiled.
Yeah. And kind of trying to tie in this idea of like Captain America Civil War, there was existing partisanship among the Avengers, and
Hmm.
the 14th Amendment being the literal thing that's like, you can't just be a nobleman and beat a peasant to death. You know, I want to go backwards in time to before the actual Civil War, 1849, when Edgar Allan Poe was found in great distress,
Hmm.
barely conscious, not making a lot of coherent sense right before he died. So he was found outside of a bar here in Baltimore and shortly died afterward. And there are theories around what happened to him, and one of those is cooping. Cooping is a type of, would you call it voter fraud or like voter interference?
Well, I mean, voter fraud is part of it. Voter
Yeah,
interference? Yeah, that's what we would
yeah.
probably consider it today.
They would get people who can vote really drunk, beat them up, and get them to vote for the candidate that they want these people to vote for. And, this is in an environment where Maryland, I think, remains partisan. I think that's fair to say. And so it makes sense that it happened here. And it makes sense that he was found outside of a bar because back in the day, our polling locations happen to also be sometimes taverns and bars, which is a
Yes,
iffy thing to do nowadays to think about, like, should we be drunk and voting? I don't know. But
yeah. Political parties were literal parties. Like, it was not a random circumstance that the polling places were the bars. Like, the political organizations wanted that, right? Democrats wanted it to be that case. So they could do, like, cooping is like the worst. That's the ultimate, like, that's the ugly head of it all. But, like, you went to the political party on election night and you drank and you didn't have to think, you just had to give them your name, right? Like, they would vote for you. The Republican Party, the GOP would vote for you, right? Like, you just had to go down there and be like, I'm here, let's do this thing. And they would give you free liquor, food, whatever, what have you, right? Like, we don't call political parties just to be like, it's a party of people. Like, they were literally like
raucous.
streamers and like, yeah, like it was a party.
Yeah. And, it hasn't been confirmed, and it's been so long that it's hard to find any new evidence around this. It's very tragic that he died. It kind of feels like he was on the way, I think he was on the way to meet up with his soon to be wife, I believe. He was like engaged. So he just like literally in media res, like in the middle of his story, died. And it's extremely tragic, but I think when we are so quick to call like voter fraud or voter interference, we forget there was a time already existing before the Civil War where things like this happen all the time and it wasn't of note. And also that before the Civil War, these tensions were there, even from the writing of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, right? Like, there was a tension already there that led to the Civil War.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I just realized the number of people who probably died because of voting is higher than we think. Nobody ever put it on like death records like that, but like I forget what they put on Poe's death certificate, but basically it was a polite way of being like they drank themselves to death. And
Yeah.
it's like, nah, because he was what, wearing clothes that weren't even his? He
I
wasn't
think
even
he
wearing
was
his clothes.
unclothed to some extent.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he was really roughed up.
And it's like, some doctor was like, I don't know, throw him over there with the others.
Yeah, he's just another poor guy.
Because the thinking was, well, who cares?
Yeah.
Which is why we have things like the 14th Amendment.
Mm,
You're in a position of responsibility. You should care.
absolutely. I think these are all things that I'm kind of like circuitously coming towards talking about right now with the inauguration and the executive orders that have started firing off already. But all this to say, like, the seeds of division were sown at the start. And it's weird for us to be like, why are we all so divided? Like, what's wrong with the world nowadays? Because it's kind of been like this. And it's not like the Reconstruction really super
Finished.
brought us together. It was like concession to the point of going backwards on the Emancipation Proclamation.
Hmm.
So, all this to say, like, it's not coming out of nowhere, and we're going to continue having to find ways to reach across the aisle and like talk about what needs to be done because at the end of the day we're all humans. We all need specific things like food and water and air and shelter, right? And like most of us would like that for ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we are fighting because they shouldn't get that, they shouldn't have that, like they shouldn't have access to that, like you realize you're opening the door for people to take that away from you.
Yes. Thank you. Right? Thank you. Like one of my favorite takes on the separation of church and state, Thomas Jefferson championed this idea. He was like, we should have separation of church and state, not to protect the state from the church, but to protect the church from state. Because if they can intermingle and they're connected, well, if there's a policy change in the state, it could change the church, right? Or it would change the church. And he was like, if the whole purpose of this institution is to be some supernatural thing, policy from over here should not change this mission. It shouldn't impact this mission at all. And so he advocated for it not to be like, we can't have Catholics running America. It was like, I don't want the law, I don't want the church to change because of anything going on in the state house. And all of the people, the Lauren Boberts of the world, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, are like, we need Christ in, the state house and the Capitol. And it's like, it's all fun and games until the Capitol goes into it and goes to where Jesus is, right? It's all fun and games until somebody bans your denomination because it's not really Christian. It's all fun and games until somebody closes down your church,
Yeah,
right? Like this is why there's a separation. And
right.
like,
These doors go both ways.
hmm and I'll say this too. Like, I don't think us being divided, or not even us, but like the division in the Marvel universe, the division from the Civil War, we're acting as if there shouldn't be a division, as if the unity should be like universal, as in everybody should feel and think the same, as if there's an end to the experiment that is moral thinking. That
Mm.
was a very complex philosophy thought.
You're good.
Like, there's no, people think evolution gets is evidence. It's a process by which something is refined to an end, and it's like no, it's just a process that moves something, right? Like a bird that evolves into something, it's going to evolve into something else if its environment changes. That's how it should work, right?
Hmm.
In the same way, we don't need to be coming together across the aisle and one day there'll be no Democrats or no Republicans. No, there should be all different kinds of opposing ideologies
Yes.
because even if you think one side is more moral than the other, at the end of the day, you need a bit of a course correction. You need someone else to be like, you didn't carry your one properly right there,
Mm-hmm.
or this little piece didn't really actually work out. I think something that leftists in particular do not do is recognize that we need an opposition that truly thinks differently from us.
Yeah.
The thought is never conservatives, arch conservatives, they need to exist. The Tucker Carlsons of the world have something to say. That's never the expectation. It's never explicitly believed. And it's like, even a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
Yeah.
like you do need someone who is in, and you need to take them seriously.
Yes.
And what makes me sad today, what makes me sad, that this is not me like saying conservatives in the modern state of affairs are like good. Something that I think particularly, what's the word I'm looking for? Disqualifies. Something that disqualifies contemporary conservatism is the fact that they don't believe the same thing. In fact, they believe the opposite. They're like, everything I believe is right, and I will die to prove it. I will
Mm.
kill others to prove it. I will watch the suffering of the country to prove it. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, that's the problem. The problem isn't what you think or what you believe or why you believe it. It's the fact that you won't even have, in good faith, a discussion about it. There shouldn't be a single belief you have that you cannot stand up and
Mm-hmm.
defend in good faith, in earnesty, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Earnest.
Like, hmm there are lots of people who
Important.
just don't. Yeah, like the number of people who are like, we have to drain the swamp. We have to get rid of these liberals, and they're doing all of this crazy stuff in D.C. And it's like, have you read anything Lindsey Graham has done behind the scenes? Do you not? What was the name of that guy? He was a congressperson, but he was paralyzed, and like he
Fetterman?
finally got kicked out. No, what was his name? He was a conservative. He was kind of young, and he was when he left Congress, he talked about how there were a lot of like there was a lot of partying and a
Oh,
lot of
Matt
like
Gates?
drugs. No, well, I mean, Matt Gaetz was definitely participating in it, but no, Madison Hawthorne. I can't remember his name, but it was just he was someone. He was part of that like
Yeah, I know who you're
super
talking about.
duper conservative. Yeah, and he just at the end of it all, he's like, yeah, no, all these people are just partying and doing all of the things that like conservatives rail against. They're doing it in DC. They're having fun, right? The hypocrisy of being like, well, you can't participate in these kinds of sins, and it's like, as soon as the cameras are off, okay, so who's sinning tonight? Who's doing the sin party,
Where's the sin
right? Like,
happening?
where's the sin happening, right? Like, we're all mad at Diddy, but a lot of people went to those parties, right? Like,
Absolutely. A lot of people were complicit, and, you know, I think there was a moment where we got angry at both sidesisms. Is that a word? Both
mhm,
sidism?
yes,
Where it's like
it
good
is
people on
now.
both sides, right? And the other side was like literal Nazis or something. So, fair to get angry at, but you are right. There is a certain level of, if you really believe something, you will rise to the occasion to test your morals and values against people, and people who believe otherwise, and find a way to exist going forward.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
recognizing that your values aren't your perspective. Like, you have a particular policy position, and it just the vote doesn't go your way. It doesn't mean the things that you believe in have been ignored or thrown out. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater,
yes,
right? Your ideals are still being followed. We're just adding to it or doing something slightly off the path you thought we should be on. We're still wearing the same shoes. We're still doing the same things. There's just a little something extra.
yes, absolutely. And I was gonna make a joke when you were talking about like the left not being open to conversation, and you had like a moment where you're like Professor X, and I was gonna make a joke about like I'm over here popping pussy and he's over there popping neurons. I don't know. Not a great joke, I will admit. But
Sometimes you gotta pop their neurons, you know what I'm saying?
Pop some neurons, yeah. We are nerdy. But anyway, let's talk about the inauguration.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's time. Like, yikes, I guess, first of all.
Yeah, it was. Somebody pointed out that like there was over $1 trillion of value in like one row. And I was like, yeah, it's a little interesting to be standing in the people's house, to be standing in a building dedicated to the common cause and have the vast majority of American wealth sitting there,
Yes.
right? Like that
Yeah,
is,
the way
it's,
this time around the billionaires are flocking to Trump, it's like, well, well,
yeah,
well.
it is kind of freaky to me.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know why it just genuinely surprises me to see a lot of people flocking to Trump thinking that his presence speaks to something greater. Um, and also, this is a little bit petty of me, but it's only petty in the sense that it's something that bothers me in the lowest possible key. Like when Trump was getting like sworn in, he didn't put his hand on the Bible or
Yes,
Bibles. Logistically, most people don't realize this, but like the actual changeover happens at like midnight. Like there are forms that are signed, right? Like it is not something where the ceremony is the thing that confers the responsibility. In that very room they were in, they were probably actually like on a desk signing over, Joe Biden had to sign something and Trump had to sign something and someone had to certify it. It kind of bothered me because I'm like, you put your hand on the, it doesn't, it doesn't do anything literally. It's not a requirement, but
he'll burn
I
his
mean, it's
hand.
kind of a requirement,
Sorry,
right? Like it's a,
a
it's
joke. I said it would
right,
burn
like it's
his skin.
yeah, no. It's, I mean, see, like, I'm like, I kind of want to see him touch the Bible. I want to make sure, right? Nobody, as far as I know, nobody's caught flames, but at the same time, everybody just touches the Bible. Like, it's superstition, but just put your hand on there, man. Like, just do the thing.
There's these really basic traditions that don't actually officially have to mean anything that I don't even really think Trump is fully aware of and ignores, right? But then the part where the Democrats stick to it like it's law, where Biden has to have Trump over for tea after saying he's the next Hitler. Like it's a little weird how much the Democrats stick to like respectability and these ceremonial like gestures of politeness when literally we are getting a Heil Hitler at the inauguration from Musk.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't understand how we keep decorum in this time in these times. It like drives me crazy.
Doesn't it though? It's something that I think the Democratic Party hasn't fully recognized yet institutionally. There are definitely members and thinkers who are saying what you're saying. Right? Hell, you're saying it, right? Like it's not something people don't know. But the party is far more interested in the appearance of decorum than the reality of the situation they are in. Somebody, I forget who it was, some congressperson tried to shake Kamala Harris's husband's Doug's hand. And apparently his immediate response was, why would I shake your hand when you can't even shake my wife's? We're not going to pretend to be, decent to each other I mean, what did you think I would? You thought I would shake your hand? You wouldn't shake my wife's hand. But why would you even hold your hand out? The fact that even you think I would participate in the sort of decorum as decorum is evidence of you knowing that most of the people in my camp will do the nice thing because they're supposed to. It's a very, I love the word milk toast. It is so old fashioned, but I love it because it's so weird. Like milk toast, it's the best word. The Democratic Party's attachment to being the people who do this performative tea ceremony for the sake of it being there. It's milk toast. It's kind of hard for you to be like, this guy is a fascist, but I'm going to shake his hand and we're going to have tea. Like, If you really believe that, would you have tea? If somebody said that about me and then invited me over, the level of trust I have to know that it means nothing, that I knew that you were saying it to say it. If I genuinely was like, I'm not going to tea after you just called me that, it's because I think you would do something to the tea or do something to me, right? But me even going, me even participating in, it's like all they really care about is, you know, going through the motions. And the party, I don't think, as an organization, as an institution, fully sees that yet. But I think the other party sees it. I think they figured that part out. I'm just going to say it. I think the Republicans have been reading Democrats rather easily. But that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah, I think it's crazy the amount of ringing the alarm about like the next big dystopia, the dark ages. Yes, they are literally trying to do that, but then to turn around and be like, tea, would you like some
Yeah,
tea? And shake hands. And it's just like, y'all, like, this rings way false. Like, you don't seem authentic or genuine when you do shit like that. Like, that's not.
yeah. If you genuinely believe in what you say about the opposition or about a particular way of thinking, you do certain things. I think, for better or worse, the conservative wings of the GOP have given an authenticity to their party that I don't think the Democrats have, because they will do anything to stop the things they do not want, right? They will press any button. They will throw someone under the bus. Kevin McCarthy, it took all night for the vote for him to be speaker, because a few people in his party, in their caucus, were like, I won't do it until you give me these things, right? A few people recognized that they had enough, that they just 10 people came together, it would stop him from being speaker. And they negotiated a new paradigm, right? Sorry to go off on this tangent, but like, the Speaker of the House is typically just the most powerful person in that particular party, in that particular room. You control the money, you control the party infrastructure. People vote for you as evidence of, I am submitting to your power and authority. Kevin McCarthy probably had one of the first real votes for speaker in a really long time. As in, I have to convince these people to vote for me. And the fact that at the end of it all, he was like, okay, I'm the speaker, I won. It's like, no, dude, you don't have any power in this situation. You are here to fill the seat, because Nancy Pelosi, she controls a fundraising apparatus which is invaluable to a great many Democratic members. And on top of that, she has, just over her decades of political experience, not only a knowledge source, but she knows people. So if it's like, I'm running for Congress wherever, and I won the the primary in my place, if Nancy Pelosi is looking at you, she's like, okay, I got you a campaign manager who can work in this area, who knows what to do. I know some places where you can get the materials you need for your campaign, and you're having a fundraiser next week. We'll hopefully be able to get X amount of money. That's not something just any old person can do. That's something that she specifically has. And that's why when it came time for her to be speaker, it was a quick vote. Same thing for like Newt Gingrich, right? Newt Gingrich controlled those people. It wasn't a question of who's going to be speaker. It's him. It's that guy right there. And like, we don't have that anymore. The fact that like that's gone is something that I'm surprised the people who are involved in this don't see it. Kevin McCarthy didn't see it. It's like, dude, bro, you didn't understand. You lost. The very first time the vote came up and you weren't speaker automatically, that meant you didn't have the power to become the speaker. Those people over there, they are the ones who are in control of the situation. And your inability to recognize it is evidence of why he got kicked out like a month later, straight up. Right? He was unwilling. He personally was unwilling to do what it took, because he could have gone to the Democrats and been like, "Look at this. This is a farce. but I know that some of your people are secretly as conservative as I am, and I'm willing to liberalize a little bit to get you on my side. Let's go ahead and have another vote. I'll be the speaker. You and I are going to be best friends. You're going to be the shadow speaker. You and I are going to have a very close relationship. He didn't have that conversation. The people who actually were willing to stop the process, who upended everything, Kevin McCarthy went over them, tried to convince him, and it took all night, right? It was going to take the next day, but at the last possible, like, I remember watching it on I just turned it on just to see, because I was like, it's still going on. And like, was like, okay, everybody's leaving. And then like the C-SPAN person was like, wait, something's happening. And everyone rushed back in, because then it was like, okay, we'll do it. C-SPAN was about to like change over the camera and just happened to catch, oh, wait, I think something's happening. Those people were willing to do whatever it took. Nancy Pelosi forged the reality that she had, power and the knowledge and the Rolodex to pull a 20th century item that Gen Zers have no idea what it is. How do you leverage that? How do you use that? If you genuinely believe in something, would you not use it to the maximum fullest? It sounds so accusatory, but what are Democrats really doing if they believe in these things? Because Republicans are stopping the government. They're having rallies and demonstrations. They're in committee rooms threatening to fight people by hand. They're having show trials, and they're doing all of this stuff. They're portraying an authenticity. It's something that I think the American people can see. I just wanted to highlight that, like, the Speaker of the House
There is
typically has
power
some kind of,
before you even step into that role.
yet you stepping into that role is a formality. Technically, anyone can be the Speaker of the House. If I were Elon Musk, I could be elected as Speaker of the House. I'm a citizen, and that's it. That's all you need. They don't have to be a member of Congress. They don't have to do anything. That's it. It's quite fascinating, to say the very
Yeah.
least.
So one last thing about the inauguration and the executive orders I want to touch on is the fact that there was supposed to be like Republican civil war about the birthright citizenship. Where they're like, the Republicans are falling apart, let's laugh at them. Because the Stooges, I guess I'll call them the Doge people, Musk and Vivek.
Yeah,
They were saying like, but we need good engineers from other places because they are not really trying to invest in the American education system. So they're like, well, we need people from other places. We need talented workers that we can exploit. There
well,
was
you're
so much
dumb. Like, yeah,
laughing at the infighting, but like at the end of the day, we're always just like trying to say we're smarter, we're superior, they're dumb, they're clumsy, they're like a mess, and it's like, then why are we still here? Why are we still having executive orders against birthright citizenship? Why are we still the Republicans control the House and the Senate? Like, why? We're here just trying to be smarter and superior and laugh at people, and it's totally ineffective. Can we talk about augury
yes,
and
yes,
wrap up?
absolutely,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. So I didn't want this podcast to be so doom and gloomy. I know the title is like, What's Wrong, Baltimore? But I'm realizing there's a lot wrong and we always talk about it. And I think there's a certain amount of joy I like to highlight, or even just like fun and culture. And I'm hoping that, moving into the future, we can find ways to find humor or like amusement or fun, something a little different. And honestly, that was why I had my weak attempts at joking in this specific episode. In the
They
hopes
weren't
that
weak.
it's not so intimidating to be a guest on this podcast where you have to be serious, you have to talk about like systems and facts and, civics, which we do, but I think that I want to kind of invite something more human and casual to what we do here. So,
100%.
yeah, the word inauguration has the root word aug, A-U-G, and so I guess in olden times when someone is inaugurated, they would do augury where they look for omens among the birds to see what that means for the reign of the person being inaugurated, or the term. I want to kind of talk about birds. Is that okay?
Absolutely, that's okay.
Yeah, and this
I hope.
idea came about because of this book. It's called Ornithography by Jessica Rue. And I want to talk about a few birds that I think are relevant to us and our time right now. For instance, we did talk about Edgar Allan Poe and cooping. And so let me look up ravens. I think that is relevant for Baltimore. The raven, their meaning is intelligence, according to this book. In Norse mythology, two ravens called Hugin and Munin sit atop the shoulders of the one-eyed god Odin. His companions and his spies, the birds, fly around the world each day and report back to their master, whispering their findings in his ear. The raven's association with Odin, considered the father of the Norse gods, suggests an immense respect for the bird's wisdom, but it also acknowledges its role as a scavenger. Like Odin, the god of war, the raven could be ruthless, circling over battlefields, scavenging for prey. So kind of cutthroat, kind of spies for a greater god, but also really intelligent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love this is something in the first Avengers movie because it has Thor in it, and when he's talking to Loki, there are two ravens sitting on a rock behind them. Just a little something that most
Little
people miss.
tidbit.
A little tidbit.
Yeah. There's also the blackbird in Italy. The Giorni della Merla are the coldest days of the year at the end of January, so kind of right now. A popular Italian legend claims that blackbirds were once all white. During the coldest days of winter, the birds sought refuge in chimneys where their feathers were blackened by soot. Though they are rare, albino and leucistic black and white blackbirds do appear from time to time, perhaps contributing to this lore.
Actually,
Yeah,
no.
so their meaning is transformation.
Hmm. What
Yeah.
are mockingbirds?
Mockingbirds, they are pretty common in the United States, so let me look them up. Mockingbirds. It means innocence. The northern
Innocence.
mockingbird species name means many tongues and references its mimicry skills, which results in diverse array of calls. Beloved by gardeners, these birds are known to eat pests but leave fruits and vegetables behind. They also mention Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird, where it is a symbol of innocence. They don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. The
Mm,
passage is considered a metaphor for the plight of the wrongly accused, especially victims of prejudice.
mm,
That's a good one.
that is a good one. I was just
Yeah.
curious.
No, that's a good one because I think the mockingbird range in the United States is pretty large. I do
It's the
also
state
want to
bird of
talk
Tennessee.
about. Sorry?
It says the state bird of Tennessee.
True. Yeah. Shout out to Tennessee. Yeah. I wanted to talk about the American robin.
Hmm.
Its meaning is hope. In colder parts of North America, the first sight of a robin after a long winter is a symbol of hope for the coming warmth of spring. Yeah, it talks about this story. I believe it's referencing like a Native American tribe, Shishal. I hope I said that right. My apologies. Bright orange in the process. The birds saved the people from freezing in the night, and the hunters returned the following day with food and firewood. Yeah, that's a good
I
one.
like
I
that.
like that one.
That is a good
I also wanted
one.
to
That a
kind
lot.
of point out a different moment in time. Do you remember when Bernie Sanders was speaking and a little bird landed on him and everyone
Yeah.
cheered? So, according to, I want to say, the Audubon Society, they were like analyzing what bird it is, and it's a house finch. Yeah.
House finch.
And finches are symbolic of a lot of things, including weirdly domesticity, uh, cheerfulness. See, this is just like a cursory Google search, so like take this with a grain of salt. But also, finches apparently symbolize harmony, freedom, adaptability, vulnerability, good fortune. Yeah, but there was a lot of like misinformation about what kind of bird it was that landed on Bernie Sanders. Someone was saying it's a dove because it's like, oh, the peace, the light shines and peacefulness. But Rachel Maddow also misidentified it as a goldfinch, which it's definitely not. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to bring a little moment of levity before we close for today, I guess. Yeah, I hope that everyone takes care of themselves. You gotta unplug sometimes, and that's fair. I am currently questioning how involved we should be in our online presence on Instagram. I'm completely gonna keep TikTok untouched because it's not the same TikTok in a sense. Like people are noticing the algorithm might be different, which is really suspicious. The whole thing with TikTok was really suspicious.
100%.
Yeah, so I'm like trying to discover what is a good way for us to reach people, but ultimately the product that we want to put the most time and effort and thought into is our long form content. And the social media clips are just a way for us to get the word out there that we
Probably.
do have long form content.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to, yeah, I was just going to remind everyone at the end of the day, Captain America and Iron Man shook hands and kept fighting evil together, regardless of the differences. Don't forget, thank you for listening, and we are here out of love. Let us know what's bothering you, Baltimore. Maybe we can address it next time.
Yeah, and send us an email at what's.wrong.bmore@gmail.com or DM us on Instagram at what's.wrong.bmore, BMORE. And, if you have suggestions, we are accessible through Patreon as well. So until next time, I hope you take care and find little ways to indulge.